Canada finds itself at a critical crossroads in its international relations as its diplomatic strategy undergoes a dramatic realignment under the leadership of Prime Minister Mark Carney. In a decisive break from decades of reliance on the United States, Canada is now charting a course toward forging robust alliances with Europe, a move that promises to recalibrate its position on the global stage. This investigative report delves into the multifaceted dimensions of Canada's pivot, examining the economic, political, and security implications of a policy shift that has set both allies and adversaries on high alert. Historically, Canada and the United States have maintained one of the most stable economic and strategic partnerships in the Western Hemisphere. This enduring alliance, built on shared borders and mutual interests, was long considered the bedrock of Canadian prosperity. However, the landscape began to shift when the Trump administration imposed steep tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and automotive parts. These sudden measures disrupted well-established trade patterns, placing immense pressure on Canadian manufacturers. The economic shockwaves were felt across the nation as higher costs and restricted market access took a toll on key sectors, particularly the automotive and agricultural industries. Faced with these unprecedented challenges, Prime Minister Carney recognized that clinging to an increasingly volatile American market was no longer tenable. With a background steeped in financial leadership, having served at the helm of both the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England, Carney seized the moment to pivot towards Europe and Asia. This strategic decision was not merely a response to immediate economic pressures, it was a bold political statement. By choosing to engage with European leaders before any visit to Washington, Carney signaled that Canada was determined to assert its independence and recalibrate the balance of power in North America. The implications of this move are profound, potentially reshaping regional dynamics and compelling Washington to reassess its traditional role in the continent's economic affairs. The economic realignment with Europe took center stage during Carney's inaugural international tour, which saw him in Paris and London. In Paris, the discussions with French President Emmanuel Macron went far beyond ceremonial handshakes. Both leaders explored avenues for deepening trade and financial cooperation, with Macron proposing the creation of joint working groups to tackle issues in defense, energy, and technology. This initiative underscores France's readiness to view Canada as a fully fledged strategic partner, a status that transcends the traditional view of Canada as merely an extension of American influence. Similarly, in London, Carney's engagement with British Prime Minister Starmer was marked by a return to historical and financial ties. The dialogue emphasized the benefits of shared language, cultural affinity, and long-standing financial practices, suggesting that Canada could emerge as a natural partner for Britain, especially in the post-Brexit era. Early agreements in the realm of bilateral trade and defense collaboration hint at a burgeoning partnership that may significantly reduce Canada's dependence on U.S. exports, a market that, for decades, absorbed more than 75% of its goods. However, this diversification comes with inherent risks. Should the United States choose to retaliate with additional tariffs or trade barriers, the economic repercussions could be severe. Yet, Carney appears resolute in his conviction that a diversified trade portfolio will ultimately render Canada more resilient against unilateral economic pressures. The shift in Canada's strategic priorities extends well beyond trade and economics. At the heart of the nation's defense strategy lies the controversial F-35 fighter jet program, a cornerstone of North American security arrangements. Canada's multi-billion-dollar investment in this U.S.-led initiative has recently come under intense scrutiny due to reports of an alleged kill switch embedded within the aircraft's software. This feature, if confirmed, would grant the United States the remote capability to disable the F-35 jets, thereby stripping Canada of control over its own defense assets during a diplomatic or military crisis. The implications of such a vulnerability are grave, calling into question the very autonomy of Canada's defense policy. In response to these alarming concerns, Carney's government has signaled a willingness to reconsider its participation in the F-35 program. Discussions are underway with European defense contractors, and both German and French firms have expressed interest in offering next-generation fighter aircraft devoid of the contentious control limitations imposed by the U.S. This potential pivot in defense procurement reflects a broader push by Canada to reclaim full operational command over its security apparatus. Despite warnings from Washington that such a move might jeopardize Canada's involvement in future North American defense initiatives, Carney's administration remains steadfast. The pursuit of sovereign control over defense systems is not merely a tactical adjustment but a fundamental reassertion of Canada's right to determine its own military destiny. Parallel to the defense debate, the issue of Arctic sovereignty has emerged as another flashpoint in the evolving U.S.-Canada relationship. The retreat of ice in the Arctic region has unlocked new trade routes and exposed valuable natural resources, intensifying the struggle for territorial control. While the United States largely views the Arctic as a collection of international waters, Canada maintains that these areas fall under its sovereign domain. Under Prime Minister Carney's leadership, Canada has taken decisive steps to bolster its presence in the region, increasing military deployments to reinforce its territorial claims. This assertive posture not only underscores Canada's determination to safeguard its interests but also aligns with a growing chorus of European allies, who back Canada's interpretation of international law regarding Arctic sovereignty. The unfolding situation in the Arctic is emblematic of Canada's broader strategy, a strategic maneuver aimed at reducing dependency on American security guarantees by cultivating alternative alliances. Yet, as Canada embarks on this ambitious reorientation, the specter of retaliation looms large. Washington has not remained silent, with threats to impose new tariffs on key Canadian exports including agricultural products, automotive parts, and energy resources. The possibility of an escalating trade war presents a formidable challenge to Canadian industries that have long depended on the American market. In anticipation of such moves, Carney's government has ramped up efforts to negotiate trade agreements with European and Asian partners. Early pacts in the agricultural and energy sectors suggest that Canada's new trade strategy is beginning to yield tangible results, although the immediate impact on domestic industries could be harsh. The short-term economic pain is a calculated risk that Carney appears willing to take, betting that the long-term benefits of a diversified trade network will outweigh the costs of U.S. retaliation. As the global community watches these developments with keen interest, questions abound about the long-term viability of Canada's bold gamble. Prime Minister Carney's pivot toward Europe is a move loaded with both promise and peril. On one hand, strengthening ties with influential European powers such as France and the United Kingdom could open up new economic and strategic opportunities, enabling Canada to assert itself as a truly independent actor on the world stage. On the other hand, the risks associated with alienating a long-standing ally like the United States are substantial. Should the U.S. escalate its countermeasures, Canada could find itself embroiled in a protracted trade conflict with significant implications for its economy and national security. Central to this debate is the issue of sovereignty, both in terms of economic independence and military autonomy. The F-35 controversy, in particular, lays bare the inherent tension between participating in integrated defense projects and retaining complete control over national security assets. As Canada weighs its options, the decision to explore European alternatives represents more than a simple change in procurement strategy. It is a definitive step toward recalibrating its defense posture in a manner that prioritizes national autonomy over traditional alliances. Similarly, the intensifying contest over Arctic territories is a vivid illustration of how environmental changes can precipitate geopolitical shifts. By reinforcing its military presence in the Arctic and rallying support from European partners, Canada is not only safeguarding its territorial claims but also challenging the long-held dominance of U.S. influence in regional security affairs. This strategic realignment signals a broader ambition to emerge as an autonomous power capable of navigating a complex international landscape without undue reliance on a single dominant ally. In evaluating the road ahead, it is clear that Canada's strategy is both audacious and fraught with uncertainty. The decision to diversify trade, reassess defense alliances, and assert sovereignty in contested regions marks a significant departure from past policies. Prime Minister Carney's approach is built on the premise that a more distributed network of alliances will ultimately render Canada more resilient in the face of external pressures. However, the path to achieving this vision is riddled with challenges. Economic retaliation from the United States, the potential for a prolonged trade war, and the inherent risks of shifting defense strategies all pose substantial hurdles. As Canada moves forward, the nation stands at a strategic inflection point. The success of its new approach will depend on the ability to manage the immediate fallout from U.S. countermeasures while cultivating robust partnerships with European and Asian markets. The coming months and years will test the durability of Canada's diversified trade portfolio and its capacity to secure full operational control over its defense systems. The stakes are high, and the outcomes will have far-reaching implications not only for Canada's future but also for the broader dynamics of North American and global geopolitics. In conclusion, the transformative shifts in Canada's diplomatic and strategic posture represent a bold reimagining of its role in an increasingly multipolar world. Under the stewardship of Prime Minister Mark Carney, the nation is challenging entrenched alliances and asserting its right to independent decision-making in economic and defense matters. Whether this calculated gamble will yield long-term benefits or precipitate unforeseen challenges remains an open question. What is indisputable, however, is that Canada is no longer content to play second fiddle in a U.S.-dominated framework. Instead, it is forging a path toward greater autonomy, one that carries both promise and risk in equal measure. As debates continue to unfold over trade policies, defense contracts, and territorial claims, the ultimate verdict on Canada's strategic pivot will be determined by its ability to balance independence with the imperatives of global interdependence.